So we are thrilled to welcome Gabriella Kusz today. She is the CEO of the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association. As the CEO of the organization, she's helped the Global DCA take a softer, nimbler, and more modern approach to self-regulation in the digital asset and cryptocurrency space. With 17 years in financial services public policy and sustainable programming innovation, and with her ability to effectively advocate for key initiatives, she understands the opportunity that the current digital asset landscape presents for stakeholders. Welcome to our show. We're so happy to have you, Gabby.
Excellent. Happy to be here as well.
Awesome. So I'd love to start off with just sort of an idea of your story. So how is it that you came to get into the Web3 space?
Sure. You know, from my side, I had always been really interested in economic and financial sector transformations. I had worked at the World Bank. I had worked with the International Federation of Accountants. These were really unique roles that let me be sort of on the ground, helping countries sort of navigate, helping key stakeholders, regulators, legislators, and having to look very holistically at how you support an economy from a standpoint of the public interest and best outcomes for all possible actors. In navigating some of this. A few years ago, I went to a blockchain and digital assets conference. While I was there, I happened to learn a lot about what was going on in the digital asset space, and everything that everybody said to me had many of the markers of an economic and financial sector transformation. And it was with that perspective that I began to step out, design, focus, and really create the Global DCA to not only enable but to lead responsible innovation in the space. Our board members are amazing. They've been such active supporters, such, huge, participants in helping to drive our focus, which is really on three core areas. That's standards and guidance, education and certification, and then also globally sensitive advocacy. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we've done, how we've gotten to where we are today, and also a bit about, how to, navigate what is, quite unquestionably a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous landscape.
Oh yeah, and it feels like it's only getting more so. As a woman in the space, I have to say, I'd mentioned this to you. I kind of I heard you speak recently at a conference, and you were incredibly impressive, but also just this really credible voice on a topic that feels that is the conversation is often dominated by perhaps some of the men in the room,
Mhm.
and you've managed to really sort of carve out um, uh, a really clear voice in amongst all of that. What advice would you give for other women that are trying to really establish themselves in the space and to kind of build that same sense of kind of credibility and brand?
Mhm. You need to get a publicist. I think that was kind of the first lesson that I learned is that, a lot of what you can do on your own, but, um, that's a very important piece of sort of carving out your role, your voice, your messaging is to have that professional support in doing that. And that's been a really key piece of advice that was given to me early on that helped me get into conversations, rooms, opportunities that I probably wouldn't have ever had. I think, that's sort of the like maybe not exactly
Yeah,
what you're looking for, but I think it's like very
it's
tangible, important advice.
practical. Yeah,
Yeah, get a publicist.
yeah.
I think the other thing is, to really kind of start to carve out your own unique voice. And to trust yourself. Like a lot of times in the beginning, I had always had these thoughts, but I just had never expressed them because I said to myself, well, I don't know if other people agree with that, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. And the truth is that, at a certain point, you are the best determinant of what you should be saying, how you should be messaging. And I think that like for a lot of this, it takes a little bit of almost like fighting yourself. To like get to the point where you say to yourself, I'm okay with this. I need to just be out there, step out
Yeah.
there, say what I have to say. And if somebody disagrees with it, I'm confident enough to defend my position and to be able to push back. And I think that that was a piece that I felt very seriously about. Um, I think as well, like one of the pieces that I really focused on, especially in the beginning, was this idea that, my experience, although not traditional, was very relevant to what was happening. And I think there were a lot of people that discounted that and said, well, you don't come from traditional finance, or you're not a like traditional technology person. And although that was true, I think I had to believe in myself and I had to be my first and most important supporter in order to get to where I was. And I think that that was a lot of overcoming like those internal hesitations and just doing it. Like there's other people out there, and especially when I compare myself to some of like my male counterparts, like they don't hesitate. They just say, do, and even if it's really wrong, like just like you take that with gusto, man. And so I feel like, you're going to be right hopefully most of the time, knock on wood. And sometimes you're going to be wrong, and that's okay. And you just have to own that and take the next steps through it.
I think that's amazing advice, and the reality is this is a you sort of that confidence building, regardless of any industry that you're in, right? It's agnostic of industry, but I think particularly applicable sometimes when you look at the rooms that we as women are in when it comes to sort of Web3 and what that dynamic really looks like. So, as a pioneer in the space, what was your initial vision when you began, and how has that sort of evolved as you look at your own organization?
Sure. So I think the vision that we have even today is very much the same vision that we had originally. And that vision is for balanced regulation. So what we've done over time, I think, have refined that message, have like brought it forward. I think the one thing that we've been missing has been like again, just some of like the maturity of it. The more you say something over and over and over again, the I think more concise you become, the more targeted and focused, and the ability to really speak to different audiences. So it hasn't necessarily been the I would say change in direction. It's just been a refinement of what we've been doing. And that's where, like, again, some of it has been putting pieces of my former self. So a lot around impact reporting, demonstrating outcomes and impacts to people, helping people understand like what the value and importance of engaging on digital asset legislation and regulation is. All those pieces are critically important, I think, to us being able to move forward constructively. And so I think, when I look at some of this, I think, that's been sort of the biggest point of evolution of who we are and what we've become. The guiding, North Star of balanced regulation, the focus on our impact areas, so national security, geopolitical positioning, economic growth and job creation, and social outcomes. And then how do we get to those impacts and this North Star? Well, it's through some of the work on taxonomy, on stablecoin legislation and regulations, on custody work, and then also on self-regulation itself.
Got it. And so, as you sort of look ahead to the next 12 months, what are some of your goals as a leader in the space? What would you like to see happen?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest pieces is stablecoin legislation here in the United States, making sure that that gets, top billing, that it's, supported. I think the other pieces that we're looking at, in addition to stablecoin legislation, is the work and efforts that we have around putting together something around market structure. That I think is going to be another piece of legislation that will be critically important to putting the US in particular on a positive trajectory. Globally, it is supporting our partners at the International Digital Asset Exchange Association on some of the work that they've done around FATF and, some of the work in particular around FATF on, helping to support, I think, AML KYC modernization so that it is amenable, supportive. It creates and strikes that balance between consumer protection, market integrity, and then evolution of the digital asset space.
Got it. And when you look at the obviously the sort of the approach around regulation across the world is vastly different, right? From one place to another. There's been a lot of uncertainty within the United States. To what extent do you think that ultimately means we lose talent within the United States and some of the innovation and things that are like really exciting around this space?
Sure. I think some of the more exciting pieces that we're seeing are really related to the utility, the value, and the use cases that are coming forward. From my side, I think one of the pieces that has been, exceptionally exciting has been, the ability for all of this to kind of be able to generate, access, financial inclusion, to support ownership and property rights, especially with artists, but also with perhaps, underrepresented groups that typically didn't have access to markets and now have that more crowdsourced, participatory engagement. I think, the other pieces that I'm looking at are what this means for emerging and developing economies in particular. So in that regard, looking at the ability of this to really drive, I think, some of the key issue areas that we know exist. So the lack of participation in the formal financial sector, especially in regions in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe even, and really being able to drive, I think, another wave of economic development, evolution, and growth that works for people. The other piece I think that's very exciting is the fact that we're kind of at the beginning of it all. And I often tell people that, at least from my side, the ability to be at the beginning, to be able to, shape and support some of what we're doing, to know a bit about, the facts that, and we talk about this, you have structural racism, structural misogyny, all of the things that we're dealing with, structural inequity. Structure is a part of all of that. And so if you're at the very beginning and you have an ability to be part of creating that structure, to be more inclusive, to be more representative, to be more accessible for the majority of the people that exist, well, then you likely end up with, firms that succeed, that are tailored or that take that into consideration. And then you also, in the next vein, are more successful when it comes to products and services that are designed in a way that maybe meet a broader consumer need and really do help to achieve what our overriding objectives are, with regards to impact.
Yeah. I think you bring up some incredible points. One of the reasons that I really wanted to launch this show is to be able to provide a little bit of a playbook to women that want to get into the space and women that want to advance in the space, right? Where, in some ways, two slightly different challenges. When you look at people wanting to come into the space, I think one of the barriers is the market is there's a level of complexity. It's very fast moving, and I think sometimes people in trying to kind of immerse themselves in the space, it's not easy, or it can feel a little exclusive when it comes to to learning and really kind of being part of the sort of Web3 community. Even from a language point of view, I think people it feels like sometimes you're talking double Dutch to people who are not from within this industry.
Yeah.
um, any tips to women that might be listening today and thinking, I really want to get into the space, but I don't know where to kind of start?
Sure. So I think there's a number of different resources that are out there for women. I'm a member of the Bigger Pie, for example. That's a group that I have found that is, very welcoming, to all women with a Y. And I think that it's a group that, quite honestly, does act in sort of the better public interest for women or female identifying representatives who'd like to participate. They have both marketing channels, they have job opportunities. It's a really great resource. And, I've given back, but also, drawn from a lot of what they do. I'm also a founding member of the Association for Women in Crypto. This is another really strong group that, offers opportunities for learning, networking, engagement. And so if you're kind of on the fringe of it, looking to try to get in, this can really be a great way to kind of dip your toes, engage, and really build out. So I think that, that's another pice of it. And then
That's all.
yeah,
Go on.
these are like some great tips. And then I would say too, like go to conferences, We have our Digital Asset Connection Conference that's coming up. You can Google that for Tab Forum in the Global DCA. It's also on our website, global-dca.org. There's a lot of conferences like ours that are not heavy ticket priced. And the goal is really to try to give people access to learn, not necessarily to be very about hyping, but really to be at the first and foremost educational and capacity building.
I love that. I'm so happy that you were able to actually share some resources with our listeners. And then I suppose the other dimension of that, Gabby, for women that are maybe finding themselves in a situation right now where they've got clear ideas and they've got expertise in this space and they want to advance, but potentially they're in a situation where they're an only,
Yeah.
and I think we all know what that feels like to be sat around the table and there's no one that looks like you, and there might not even be that same, you're bringing actually diversity of thought, but it's challenging to kind of get that across. What advice would you give to women that are looking to, kind of get to where you are in the sort of executive levels and kind of
Mhm.
C-suite?
I think one piece is to, defend your ground a little bit. And what I mean by that is like I'll give you just a very recent example of being in a discussion and having someone try to talk over me. And having the ability to say, "Excuse me, no, I wasn't finished yet." And just mark your boundaries and set
Yeah.
them and then step into that. Because people do respect that. People treat you the way you kind of condition them to treat you. And I think the first thing is to make sure that you're establishing those boundaries and that, yeah, we all deal with like crises of confidence, worrying about whether or not we're qualified or the best person to do X, Y, and Z. But I think you have to kind of believe in yourself, even if you're a little bit like fake it to make it until you get there. I think it's very important to try to like own that confidence. And even if it's not quite there yet, to try to step into it and then to defend your boundaries and to make sure that your voice is heard and respected as an equal. I think those are some very important lessons. And it's going to be really uncomfortable the first couple times you do that. But it gets easier and better. And eventually people stop trying to talk over you. Obviously, it doesn't happen right away because I'm
Yeah,
still
yeah.
dealing with it. But I mean, you see what I'm saying? So I think
Totally.
that's a piece of it. I think too, it's about applying for jobs that you maybe aren't yet 100% qualified for. It's about, being your own best advocate when it comes to salary and promotion. Being able and willing and not afraid to leave a job that isn't maybe giving you the best benefits to be looking and to move elsewhere and maybe have to move back. I've done that before in my career to get to where I am. And I think it's really important to just say, loyalty is good up to a certain point, and then I
That's
think you
right.
have to look at it almost like sometimes these become almost like abusive employment relationships, and you have to really kind of take it as that.
I think I could not agree more. Have you found mentorship has been quite helpful, throughout your career?
I have, and I'll just give like, and everybody has their own experience. Honestly, like I've had some really amazing both female and male mentors, but I found that generally you need to have a mentor who's a true mentor. So there's going to be a lot of these like matching groups and this kind of thing. And you know what? Sometimes they work. So I have an amazing mentor in Abby McMurray that I found through the American Institute of CPAs. You know, she was in like tech and she's a CPA. So she's one of my mentors. And that's an example of a matching program that worked because it actually, I think, wasn't just very random. It really did try to like find people in earnest that, you know, needed each other and could support each other. Most of those relationships though I found organically. And I've also like reached out to people and said, can you be my mentor? Can you sit on my advisory board? Can you be a personal advisor to me because I need help in navigating some of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something else to like kind of step into, is to reach out for help and to have mentors because it's really hard to navigate this. And your other gendered peers, they already do this. You know, it's kind of like second nature. And for us, I think it's a little bit difficult.
Yeah, we have to be so much more intentional. 100%. Well, listen, Gabby, you have been amazing. Before we let you go, would love to you sort of find out for listeners where can they connect with you, where can they find out more about your initiatives and what you're doing, where can we find you?
Sure. So, you know, please reach out to me on Twitter. It is at Gabriella Kusz, Gabriella is my handle. I'm also on LinkedIn, Gabriella Gabby Kusz, Kusz. And then, you know, of course, you can connect through us through the website at global-dca.org.
Perfect. And we'll put all of that stuff in the show notes to make it extra easy for people to find you. But thank you so much. Thanks for dropping so much knowledge and some really helpful pointers to the women that are trying to make a difference in the space, which is something that you are doing a phenomenal job of. So thanks for joining us. And to everyone listening, we will see you next week.
Thank you.